Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Corrales Punta Cana full show. Before anything is said, I will neither confirm nor deny that this is the same exact outfit I was wearing last Wednesday night, and I will not confirm or deny whether it is for superstitious reasons. Not that sports people are ever superstitious, mind you. But we aren't here for that. We're here for everything Corrales Punta Cana, for the research, the data, the DFS. So anything that you are wanting to cover will be covered tonight. So make sure you have chat open because we are live. But we've got a lot to get into. Like I said, it's the full 3 shows in one. Hopefully your all's match play started out well. March Madness brackets are still going well. So let's not fumble around with much of an intro here. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It's an amazing resource. It is simply the best tool out there. Go check them out. It is well worth the investment. In the description of the video to YouTube and Twitch, there are links to my social media where I post my betting cards. I will be doing so again tonight for the Corrales after the show. And I will occasionally post some interesting research that I find throughout the week or pose some questions for those out there. So make sure you give me a follow at those places. And then also in the description of the YouTube video is an email to reach out to me if you want to be a part of bonus content. Things like my tournament fact sheet, my own tournament fact sheet, best bets, pivots and fades for DFS and whatnot, some bonus videos and such. So if you want to be a part of that bonus content, make sure you reach out to the email in that description. And then finally, I alluded to it, chat is open. We are live. I want to hear everything from you all regarding Corrales, match play. What are some of the wagers that you're thinking about for this week or have made already? Even if you want to talk a little trash with March Madness, I'm here for it. So why don't you jump in chat? We'll have some good discussion, and I want the interaction and all. So without any further delay, let's get into the full research, data, and our tactics for the 2022 Corrales Punta Cana. And we move over here to, surprisingly, a tournament fact sheet, which I have never seen one for tournaments held outside the United States. So I was quite thrilled, quite surprised to see a tournament fact sheet for the Corrales Punta Cana this year. And before I get too much further along, make sure I have chat up and going. Like I said, please jump in there. I want a whole lot of interaction tonight. It's going to be a fun show. But coming back to the GCSAA tournament fact sheet, we are in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. It is on the southeastern part of the island. The Corrales golf course is a long par 72, measures almost 7,700 yards. It is an extremely long course, and we'll see where that length comes in the course breakdown. But the greens are of average size to the tour, right at 6,000 square feet. It is a Tom Fazio design from 2010. Quite a lot of fairway to hit. These are generally easy fairways to hit. Quite a few bunkers. There is a 6-hole stretch where the golf course runs right along the ocean. So those are the 6 holes with water in play. We are on paspalum greens, which is very common for Caribbean-style courses. Joey, hello, good sir. How are you? How's your week been? Did we get into any DFS for the match play? Are we looking for any wagers or DFS for the Corrales? Glad to have you on and jump on and join in chat. But again, we are on paspalum greens, which is very common to the Caribbean and overseas, and paspalum everywhere, rough fairways and whatnot. The biggest thing for this course is that the 2020 event was moved to September due to the pandemic, so it got delayed a little bit. Normally it is around this time of year. and the signature part of the course is 16, 17, and 18, nicknamed the Devil's Elbow. But there is a quick look at the Corrales. So the main takeaways: a very long par 72, 6 holes with water in play, paspalum greens. So we are going to move quickly on to Fantasy National, and I've went ahead and started to filter this out for the last 6 months, which conveniently is roughly the start of the PGA Tour 2022 season. And I haven't done any other filtering with the nature of an alternate field event. I just kind of wanted to get a feel for all of the players in the field and how they've played on other PGA Tour courses in the PGA Tour season, whether that be the Mayakoba, the Puerto Rico, whether they've played stateside or not. So I just wanted to grab as much data as I could on these players, especially since we don't get a lot of the data for the golf course. The strokes gained, tee, approach, putting, no proximity numbers, stuff like that. So I wanted to get as much as I could on the players. So with no filters, just at the start, I'm actually going to put the 2022 season filter on. So from the start of the 2022 PGA Tour season, your top strokes gained total players, your top performers in the field this week, they are Matthias Schwab, Patrick Flavin, Mark Hubbard, Tyler Duncan, Thomas Detry, Johnny Vegas, Haotong Li, Joel Damon, David Lingmerth, and Alex Smalley. You will notice that some of the players like Flavin, Thomas Detry, Haotong Li, they have one tournament at most. Flavin has two. Then you have other guys like Schwab, the Korn Ferry Tour rookie, Tyler Duncan, a PGA Tour regular, Hubbard, Vegas. That's why I wanted to grab as much information as I can to kind of get as much of a baseline as I can. So that was a look at your top strokes gained total players, just your top performers. Before we get too much further into the data, let's take a look at the course breakdown per Fantasy National. And the biggest thing that will stick out to you, at least on the scorecard, are the par threes, and that's where the length of this golf course really comes in. You have 240 yards of a par three. You have 204. You have 265 yard par three. Now it does play downhill, but it still measures to 265 yards. And then 210 as the fourth par three. So that is where a lot of the length of this course comes in these par threes. And the two par fives on the back nine, 626 yards and 623 yards. Now they do play relatively easy to about 2/10 or 15/100 of a stroke under par. So they are gettable, but there's not a lot of eagle chances on them at all. These are true 3-shot par fives just due to the length, unless the wind is going straight with the players. And again, just perfect disclosure. Like I mentioned last night in the match play DFS, the way the course is set up with Wind Finder and the direction Wind Finder gives, I'm just not familiar with the way that is going to correlate to the course. But I always will try to look at the 9th and 10th most difficult holes, because around there should be even par for a straight average course. And fortunately, hole number 10 is straight to par. So this is roughly an average difficulty course. Again, you have two decent eagle chances. They are the par fives on the front, and they are really, really short, at least by this course's standards. You have a 515 yard par five and a 565, so nowhere near the 600 plusers on the back. But this course has opportunities to really come up and get you if you're not careful, especially the finishing hole. A 500 plus yard par 4 plays to 2/10 over par. So This is by no means an easy course, not by no means an easy tournament. But there is a look from the scorecard. Your strokes gained by hole by par. In the top tens, it's par fours that are most important, and then par fives, and then par threes. But part of my research today for the tournament really threw me off, because as you move up the leaderboard, you move to the players in the top five, this par threes really start taking off. The par fours stay roughly the same, maybe gain in importance a little bit, and the par fives really shrink. So if that's the case, you would think that the winners would continue this trend. Well, it's not. The winners, the par fives, are the most important, and then the par threes and the par fours. So what this is getting at is that the par fours do get mitigated here in importance. But it really threw me off trying to narrow down what holes specifically and what hole by par was the most important here at the Corrales. My tendency is to think it's par threes, even though the par fives are the most indicating hole by par for winners. But again, as you move down to just the top fives, par fives are the least important. So I tend to think it's par threes, but I would welcome your all's input, especially those who are much more familiar with the Corrales than I am. If you've wagered this before, if you played DFS with the Corrales before, this is my first time. So would be interested to hear your input, but I am leaning towards the par threes being the most important. But there's a look at the average stroke gain by hole by par. Normally there is a course composition chart here listing the lengths of the par threes, the par fours, the par fives. I went ahead and made that in Microsoft Excel to the best of my ability per Pro Visualizer. And I've done the same again with an estimated approach shot distribution per Pro Visualizer. So one of the few charts more that we have, the scoring distribution around the par, I said it was roughly average. There's quite a few more birdies than bogeys. There's a whole lot of pars. So I still stand by the fact that it plays average, but it will play to the easier side of average. The historic cut line in the 3 years that it's been held, 4 tournaments, 3 years, it's been even par, -1 and -2. So gradually getting easier, but it's still well within the realm of average by terms of difficulty by PGA Tour standards. The fairways are quite large, so driving accuracy is quite high here, especially in relation to average tour event. Green regulation percentage is smaller, and these are average size greens, but just speaking to the length of the course, it's just harder to hit greens. Scrambling percentage higher. 3 putts per round, slightly under slightly under tour event average, but not by much. So with that, I'm going to switch views here and go to Microsoft Excel and bring up the chart that I had just alluded to with the hole yardages, the course composition per Pro Visualizer. So you have 4 par threes, all of them measuring above 200 yards, 2 in the 200 to 225 bucket, and 2 in the 225 plus, including that one monster 265 yard par 3, at least on the scorecard. The par 4s, you have 10 of those. You have 2 in the 350 to 400. You have 4 in the 400 to 450. 3 in the 450 to 500, and 1 that's 500 plus. That's the 18th, the finishing hole, the most difficult hole in the course. Then your 4 par 5s, you've got 1 shorter length at 500 to 550, a medium length 550 to 600, and then the 2 par 5s on the back 9 both measure over 600 yards. So there is a look at the course composition chart that is normally in Fantasy National. I did my best to recreate that, and then likewise with an estimated proximity chart, approach shot distribution, you have 2 holes that approximate to a 75 to 100 yard approach shot. These two are the two par fives on the front. So really, you can stick those on the 200 plus here because those two par fives are attackable on the front nine. But instead of having all four like it was at Austin last night, you really do only have two par fives that are attackable. So when it says 100 to 125, I would say that's pretty legitimate. The par fives on the back are true three shotters. So you have five 100 to 125 estimated approach shots, three from 125 to 150, one from 150 to 175, two 175 to 200, and then three, what I would say three in the 200 plus. And again, this is just by Pro Visualizer. I will not say that is, the be all end all. You should take this as authority. That is all per Pro Visualizer. But that is my best attempt at recreating those two charts in Fantasy National. So I'm going to switch back over to the web page view in my software. But anyway, so there is the scorecard and course breakdown in Fantasy National. As we look at the historic conditions, and apologies, let me bring chat back up as I have a bajillion tabs open. The 3 years that it has been measured, at least by Fantasy National, you can see that it's generally average. It was average all of last year. It does play more on the easy side, but it can get difficult. It can really get difficult. The fairways have generally been easy. Rough is short. The green speeds are always average. You would expect that in a windy environment. Places like the Bermuda, like Puerto Rico, they have to keep their greens slow. I'm surprised these aren't Velcro, to be honest with you, just due to the amount of wind that those areas get. So the course length always over 7,400. That's never been in debate, and there can be some wind. And we'll take a look at Wind Finder before we switch to Microsoft Excel permanently. But there's a look at the historic tournament conditions. Tournament history, here are the players that generally play this event well. Your defending champion, Joel Damon, is back. He has played this event very, very well. 3 for 3 in making the cut, nothing worse than a tie for 13th. Your 2020 champion, Hudson Swafford, is here. 2019, Graham McDowell, and 2018, Bryce Garnett is here. So your past 4 champions are here. So your best players that have played this event, Joel Damon, Bryce Garnett, we mentioned Kelly Craft. He's 3 for 4. All the 3 cuts are all inside the top 15. He did miss the cut last year. Hudson Swafford, 2 for 3. Graham McDowell, 2 for 4, but his 2 cuts made are top 5s. George McNeil, 3 for 4. David Hearn, 4 for 4. Grillo, 3 for 3. Jonathan Bird, 4 for 4. David Lingmerth, 2 for 4. DJ Trahan, 4 for 4. Really, I'm not counting 2017 because it went to Corrales Golf Club in 2018. So DJ Trahan, 4 for 4. So there's a look at some of the guys that play this pretty well. On the other end of the spectrum, these are players that for whatever reason just haven't played this well. Parker McLaughlin is 3 for 5 in making the cut, but all of them are pretty clunker finishes. Let's see. DA Points, 0 for 2. Brian Davis, 0 for 3. Greg Chalmers, 0 for 2. Robert Garrigus, 0 for 3. I count a withdrawal as a miscut. 0 for 3. Dominic Balzelli, 2 for 3, with 1 being a pretty middling finish, so it's surprising to see him so low in the strokes gained total. This must have been really bad last year. Grayson Murray, 2 for 3 with a top 15, and yet he is still strokes gained total negative for the event. Interesting to see. You come down here a little further. You've got Rafael Campos, tied for second last year, but it was his only cut made. Let's see. Fabian Gomez, 3 for 4, and still negative. So interesting stuff to see there. We'll get more data-centric around this type of data here in a little bit in the Microsoft Excel portion. I do have the historic leaderboards up in case we want to take a look, especially last year's. But let's go ahead and move to the main page for Fantasy National, and I'll explain the stars once we get to the DFS Tactics portion. But the first thing we always do, now that we know green type, is we check on the putting. Well, you'll notice that we don't get any putting statistics for any courses that are past Palom. They are generally all overseas. Cocoa Beach from the Puerto Rico is the only data we have from the 2022 season. So I'm going to take that filter off. And even going back 12 months, it's not really all that much. It's still just the Puerto Rico. So I went back all the way to January 1st of 2020, just to get a good idea of performance. We can just go by strokes gained total on past Palom courses. That's the best we can do. But since January 1st of 2020, and this is the only tournaments there are. There are Puerto Rico 3 times this past year, 2021 and 2020. You've got the Corrales, and then you have what used to be the OHL, now the Mayakoba. So really only 5 courses that make up possibly 6 if someone played the Mayakoba this fall. But not many tournaments will be gathered in this data. So your top performers on past Palom courses since the beginning of 2020: Emiliano Grillo, Cameron Percy, Johnny Vegas, Hudson Swafford, Brandon Wu, Max McGreevy, Nate Lashley, Vincent Whaley, Chad Ramey, and Callum Tarrant. And Callum Tarrant had a very good 2022 Puerto Rico. That's why he is so high up. But there's a look at your past Palom performers. I'm going to go ahead and take that filter off. There's not much we can do with that. I am going to bring this into the last calendar year, and I am going to narrow it down to the last 36 rounds. Like I said, I'm pretty familiar with the research that I did today. I am going to put the long course filter on. We know for absolute certainty that this is going to play over 7,400 yards. There are only 17 rounds to be gathered, but that's still going to be enough. Your top performers on long courses in the past calendar year. You've got Emiliano Grillo, Graham McDowell, Bryce Garnett, Tommy Gainey, David Lingmerth, Max McGreevy, Ben Martin, Chad Ramey, Matthias Schwab, and Nate Lashley are your top 10. So we've already seen a little bit of overlap. Grillo was the top at past Palom. He's now the top on long courses. I believe Bryce Garnett was second in past Palom. He's now third on long courses. Chad Ramey was up there. Schwab has been playing very well. I see him out of the corner of my eye. Vegas just missed the top 10. I know he was in the top 10 for past Palom courses. So a lot of similarities here. I'm going to remove that filter and just a bit of foreshadowing. I am going to bring up the windy metric, and I'm going to add the moderate. So in the past calendar year, actually, you know what? I'm going to bring that into 6 months. That's what I did for the match play. So in the last 6 months, we still have 24 rounds, so it's plenty. In the past 6 months, your top performers in the wind: Camilo Villegas, Hudson Swafford, Johnny Vegas, Chase Seifert, Patrick Rogers, Patrick Flavin, Thomas Detry, Sahith Tagala, Sean O'Hare, Alex Smalley, and Kramer Hickok. So, again, some more overlap. Johnny Vegas, I believe Flavin was in the long course. Detry's been up there. This is the first time we're seeing Tagala. So good stuff there. And then finally, I'm going to take off the windy conditions. Anyone who's followed me for any length of time, I'm always a believer in strokes gained approach. I think that is the most indicative stat of long-term success. So your top strokes gained approach players in the past 6 months, essentially since the start of the 2022 PGA Tour season. Your top strokes gained approach players: Austin Smotherman, Kirk Kitayama, Justin Lauer, DJ Trahan, Adam Svensson, Aaron Rye, Joel Damon, Johnny Vegas, Hao Tong Lee, and Wesley Bryan. Take Hao Tong Li with a bit of grain of salt. He only has 4 rounds. I believe it was, it's from the Sony. I would have thought it was from the Mayakoba or the CJ Cup. But he did play the Sony, and his irons, at least, were really darn good. But anyway, so there is a look at Hao Tong Li. It's only 4 rounds, so take it a little bit of grain of salt because it's a small sample size. These other guys I would feel fairly comfortable with, especially the Austin Smothermans, the Kurt Kitayamas, the Svenssons, these Korn Ferry Tour grads, Johnny Vegas, Joel Damon, these normal or regular PGA Tour players. I think that's going to do it for a little bit of the overhead. We're still going to be in the quote data dive portion of this. Let's try and figure out if we can get a sense of some of the metrics that might be able to we can kind of gather and might play here, at least of the ones that we're able to gather through Fantasy National. When you look at a course, it's always good to look at either birdies or bogeys, maybe eagles if it's playing easy. With this being an average difficulty course, we don't know if birdies or bogeys are more prevalent. That is why I have the leaderboard up. Minus 18 has actually been the winner 3 of the 4 years since 2018. The only year it wasn't was 20, I think it was in the special, I'll call it special, the September version of the event where Joel Damon won at minus 12, I believe, is the only time it was not minus 18. But we'll take a look at birdies and bogeys, at least from last year, maybe another year. Here, it looks like birdies are the more prevalent of the two between birdies and bogeys. Even this red here, though, is basically field average, same down here. But you certainly have a lot higher numbers in the birdies. But something else that kind of threw me in the research today for this tournament, again, we come to birdies and bogeys. Again, a lot more birdies. It looks like higher numbers as well, but the negatives are higher also in the birdies. But then you come to 2018, and it is the bogeys that are more important. So because we only have 3 years, didn't make a outlier sheet or anything like that. I'm kind of torn between the two. Is 2018 the outlier? I don't know. So instead of focusing purely on birdies or bogeys, let's just take. That's not what I meant to do. Let's just take a look at the totality of birdies or better, maybe opportunities and whatnot. So your top. Let's do opportunities gained. Your top opportunities gained players since the start of the 2022 season: Austin Smotherman, Aaron Rai, Hudson Swafford, Chad Ramey, Hao Tong Li, Kurt Kitayama, Emiliano Grillo, Rick Lamb, Joshua Creel, John Huh, and Robert Garrigus. Something else I really, really want to do, actually before I do that, so your top 10, that was your top 10 in opportunities gained. If you want to take a look at your top 10 opportunities and birdies, you've got Hudson Swafford, 3rd in opportunities, 9th in birdies. Chad Ramey, 4th and 10th. Hao Tong Li, 5th and 7th. And Robert Garrigus, 10th and 5th. Conversely, if you want to look at bogeys avoided, with the top 10 in opportunities gained, Austin Smotherman, 1st and 4th. Hao Tong Li, 5th and 7th. So he is top 10 in all 3. Opportunities, birdies, and bogeys. But again, it's only 4 rounds, so take it with a little bit of grain of salt. But those are the only 2 that are top 10 in opportunities and bogeys avoided. But what I am really wanting to do here is take a look at the long course metric. So over 7,400 yards, I will bring this out to the full 12 months, last 12 months, because that's what we needed for the strokes gained total. So your top opportunities gained players on long courses: Emiliano Grillo, Austin Smotherman, Bo Van Pelt, Kevin Chappell, Hayden Buckley, Camilo Villegas, Kyle Stanley, Sahith Tagala, Aaron Rai, and Kurt Kitayama. using that same method that we just applied with no filters, on long courses, your top 10 in opportunities and birdies, you've got Emiliano Grillo first and first. You have Fajegas 5th and 5th. Kitayama 10th and 2nd. And I'll give an honorable mention to Bo Van Pelt. He is 2nd in opportunities, 11th in birdies. Now, if you want to look at opportunities and bogeys, top 10 each, Grillo 1st and 5th. So Grillo is 1st, and 5th. It's pretty tough to beat. The only other one that's top 10 in opportunities and bogeys, the only other one is Kyle Stanley, 7th in opportunities, 2nd in avoiding bogeys. So good stuff there. Not sure how much we're going to use this, especially since the course generally plays as average. We don't really get a sense of any strong indicator, birdies versus bogeys. But I did want to bring that up. Let's take a look at fairways and greens. On a long course, we'll come back to leaderboard. On a long course, perhaps distance is a big factor. Well, at least last year, it really wasn't. Your top 7 players, and really one of the players that tied for 8th, so I just noticed it's a convenient cutoff. In the top 10, of your players that finished in the top 10 last year, half of them were negative, or in relation to field average. In relation to field average in terms of driving distance. It's not really all that much of a need here. What is needed is a bunch of greens in regulation. These are generally harder greens to hit. So if you're able to grab greens in regulation, it's going to put you much further ahead of the other players. So again, you'll look here, distance. I mean, your winner in 2019, Graham McDowell, negative in distance, which is an odd thing to think about. Since the course is long, you would think distance is key. It's not. It's really not. It's greens. You've got to be able to hit your greens. Even fairways, because the fairways are so easy, it's not even fairways gained. It is simply your greens in regulation. Distance, again, Bryce Garnett, negative in terms of the field. It was all greens. So definitely going to be looking at greens in regulation. So your top greens in regulation players we'll stay at long courses. Your top greens in regulation players on long courses in the past calendar year: Bryce Garnett, Emiliano Grillo, Hank Lebioda, Justin Lauer, Chase Seifert, Sung Kang, Alex Smalley, Johnny Vegas, Thomas Detry, and Max McGreevy. So a lot of these same names keep overlapping. Bryce Garnett, Emiliano Grillo, Justin Lauer's popped a few times, Johnny Vegas, Detry's popped a lot. So good stuff there. And then I'm going to take that filter off, go to the last 6 months, add the PGA Tour season. So in the past 6 months, your top performers in greens and regulation gained: Adams Vinson, Johnny Vegas, Justin Lauer, Patrick Rogers, Matthias Schwab, Alex Smalley, Joel Damon, Austin Smotherman, Scott Gostowski, and Doc Redman. So again, some more overlap here. Johnny Vegas, long courses and greens in general. Justin Lauer, same. Smotherman, I believe, was close to it in the long course. So lots of good stuff there. We'll move to, because we don't get any proximity data or putting data from Corrales Golf Club, we'll just move into straight par threes. And again, from the leaderboard, we will take a look at par 3 efficiency. While it is important, it does not appear that either of the two ranges have a dominant effect or dominant correlation. It's just strokes gained par 3. And really the only one that played it terribly last year and with any amount of high success was Anibal Lahiri. Yes, Capellan and Jones were negative, but not to the extent that it was crippling. Just under a stroke under the field average. So your top par 3 performers since the start of the PGA Tour season: Dylan Wu, David Lipsky, Grayson Murray, Patrick Rogers, Justin Lauer, Tyler Duncan, DJ Trahan, Mark Hubbard, Sahith Theegala, and Brian Stewart. All right, so that could explain some of the success that some of these players have had here. DJ Trahan comes to mind. Justin Lauer has popped on almost seemingly all of these. Grayson Murray was 2 for 3, I believe, in his cuts made. One of them being a top 5 or top 15. That explains this. Par 3 seemed to be very, very key. David Lipsky has been playing well in his inaugural season on the PGA Tour. So good stuff there. Let's move to the par 4s. And this is really the only hole by par where I gathered any kind of credence to what range is, or what length of par 4s mattered. But first we'll take a look at strokes gained par 4. Just in general, your top performers on par 4s this PGA Tour season: Matthias Schwab, Patrick Flavin, Chase Seifert, Johnny Vegas, Brian Stewart, Tyler Duncan, Ryan Armour, Nate Lashley, Bo Van Pelt, and Haotong Li. And I'll come back here to the leaderboard, at least from last year, very quickly. You see here, par 4s, very important. It looks like it would be the 450 to 500 for the extreme high leaderboard, but I want you to notice that there's a pretty consistent level here between the 400 and 450s. Tyler McCumber was really bad from this range, but all the others that are negative are slightly negative until you come down to Kelly Craft, who missed the cut last year, I think. No, he missed the cut in I guess it was technically the 2020 Corrales. But you come to 2019, you're going to see more of the same. The 400 to 450 really starts to kind of stand out. It might not look it from the upper part of the leaderboard, but when you start coming into the top 20s to the top 25s, they're all positive. And then in 2018, you have more of the same, 400 to 450 being positive, especially in the top 30s, top 25s, even some of the top 20s. So to me, it looks like the 400 to 450 is the most important range here, which makes sense that that's the length of par 4 that is most prevalent here. You've got 5 or half of your par 4s are of this length. So during the PGA Tour this PGA Tour season, your top performers on par 4s, 400 to 450 yards: Chase Seifert, Austin Smotherman, Patrick Flavin, Joel Damon, Matthias Schwab, Rick Lamb, Kramer Hickok, Andrew Novak, Aaron Baddeley, Tyler Duncan, Derek Ernst, and Fabian Gomez. A lot of those tied for 10th. So doing what we did with the opportunities and birdies and bogeys, your top 10 in both overall par 4 performance and performance between 400 and 450 yards. You've got Chase Seifert, who's 3rd in overall par 4s, 1st in the length. Patrick Flavin, I think I'm saying that right, Flavin, 2nd and 3rd. Schwab, 1st and 5th. Tyler Duncan, 5th and 10th. I'll give a slight honorable mention to Nate Lashley, 8th and 13th. So there's a look at the par 4s. And finally, par 5s. I didn't see a range where the shorter or the longer didn't, neither of them or none of them factored in. I'm just trying to save a little bit of time to have enough for the DFS portion. So just pure strokes gained par 5 performance this PGA Tour season: Cameron Percy, Sahith Theegala, Aaron Rai, Jared Wolfe, Seth Reeves, Robert Garrigus, Johnny Vegas, Hudson Swafford, Brandon Hagee, Callum Tarrant, and Jason Duffner. Again, you're seeing a lot of these same names overlap. Theegala is now starting to pop on a few of these filters. Johnny Vegas seemingly has been there the whole time. Swafford, not technically your defending champion, although they'll say that in Fantasy National. So good stuff there. We are going to move to Windfinder real quick. Thursday, same. I mean, it's pretty sustained. 16 to 17 mile an hour, gusts up into the lower 20s. Now there does appear to be some rain in the forecast overnight for Thursday. If that does indeed happen, it's going to make the course really soft, especially since they have to keep it soft naturally because of the wind. So coming into Friday morning, even though they have the more wind Friday morning, if this rain truly does hold in the forecast, I would think it'd be a Thursday p.m., Friday a.m. favor. It probably wouldn't be much, but I would think it would be a non-zero amount. But if they don't get this rain, I don't see much of a favor. If anything, it'd be the opposite, Thursday a.m., Friday p.m. But again, I don't have a strong notion that it is one way or the other. Certainly not to the level of extent that, say, the Players was this year. So Thursday and Friday look to be very windy, and then calming down Saturday and Sunday. That is a look at the wind finder. Let me bring up the mixed condition model that I made for this tournament. Again, just full disclosure, full transparency. It's a bit rushed. I had a lot going on today, pulled in a couple directions. Also pulling an all-nighter last night for the lineups for the match play. So this is 2 straight all-nighters reminding me of my college days. The mixed condition model that I made for this tournament. I've got 5% strokes gained total on Paspalum. I didn't want to go too heavy, but I did want to see who plays these style of courses well. So 5% there. 15% on long courses. That is one of the few things we can guarantee on this course that it's going to play long. So I put extra added emphasis into that. 5% on moderate and windy. Thursday and Friday look to be like that, but Saturday and Sunday don't. So I just put 5% in case it could make a difference for somebody making or missing the cut. 20% strokes gained approach with the relatively unknown golf course, at least by my standards. I'm just going to default to strokes gained approach. So I put a lot in there. That's the type of players I prefer anyway. So 20% there. 15% in greens and regulation. We saw that going through the historical data. 15% in the par threes. Again, this is kind of a hunch that I have that the par threes are going to be the most important. I've got 15% in the par four, split between 10% on normal par or all par threes, and then 5% split out on the length of the par fours. I said par threes. 10% in strokes gained par four, just total, and then 5% in the length of the par fours. And then finally, I put 10% in the par fives. I didn't know really what to do with the par fives. They got mitigated from going to the top 10 to the top 5, and then they shot up in importance for the winners. So I just kind of defaulted to 10%, went, So anyway, when I ran this data model with these percentages, the rankings that I came out with, Austin Smotherman, number 1, Matthias Schwab, number 2, Johnny Vegas, Hao Tong Lee, put a little bit of an asterisk with him here in a second, Nick Taylor, David Lipsky, Doc Redman, Joel Damon, Justin Lauer, and Brian Stewart. I've talked about it this whole time we've been looking at Hao Tong Lee. I'm putting a pretty big asterisk, to be fair, because all of this data is from 4 rounds. Now, it's very good data. He played the Sony, I think, pretty darn well. Top 15. So, very darn well. But that's the only thing he has from the PGA Tour this calendar season. But he was, top 20 at the PGA last year at Kiowa. So, I mean, the guy can play. I mean, it's not a fluke. So, he's also good in the wind. So there's enough to like here with Hao Tong Lee if you want to put some credence in the fact that he played the Sony well. I'm just putting an asterisk with it because small sample size usually means volatile data. But there's a look at my rankings. I don't want to go too much through it. I also don't want to go too much into the price board. I want to make sure we save time for enough lineups and everything I want to get to in Microsoft Excel. But quick look at the 10Ks. I'll bring up the projected ownership. Sorry, I lost my mind for a second trying to bring up chat and stuff. So in the 10Ks, you've got Vegas, Tagala, Joel Damon, Lashley, and Hubbard. 2 guys are getting a whole lot of use, the most and second most projected owned players. probably who you think. Johnny Vegas, for obvious reasons. Joel Damon, the defending champ. Both of those are hovering right at 19%. These are two guys I'm not going to be getting away from in DFS, especially with so many unknown commodities. It's always nice to just at least know what you're putting in your lineup. Johnny Vegas should be really darn good this year, and Joel Damon's the defending champion. You know he likes the course, knows the course. So there's a quick look at the 10Ks. The 9Ks, you've got your third most projected owned player in here in Kramer Hickok. Kramer Hickok seems to be a bit of a fade for me, especially at his high projected ownership. There's enough guys in the 9Ks that I really like, starting with Matthias Schwab. He's had two very, very good tournaments, both top 10s at the Puerto Rico, which is a very similar styled course as the Corrales, and at the Honda, I believe it was. I'll check very quickly. Top 10 at the Honda, top 10 at the Puerto Rico. I like what Schwab's been having going on. Even when he missed a cut at the Valspar, his irons were there. It was just putting. So I'll take that chance all day long. I've mentioned I prefer iron players. So a lot to like with Schwab. I don't mind Adam Svensson, Doc Redman. Very good. Great at greens and regulation. Great at the par fours. Irons are good. So there's enough in here in the 9Ks that I can fade the Kramer Hickok chalk. Moving into the 8s, in here you're getting you're starting to get your haves and have-nots. You're either a pivot or fairly darn chalky. You've got let's see, in the 8s you have Rye at 13.5%. Grayson Sigg at 12. Otherwise, you've got a lot of middling to pure pivots. The Højgaards, both Rasmus and Nikolai, 3% and 1.5%. Now, I'm not going to play either of them, but Nikolai Højgaard came in with a lot of hype at his debut. It didn't go well for him, but this is a guy that can really play. He just missed out on playing at the match play. I believe he's top 80 or so in the world. So, guy can really play. I like Aaron Rye this week. I don't know if I'll be able to get off of as much of him as I want to, since he's the most chalky in this area. It's surprising that Emiliano Grillo didn't rate out so well in my data model, since he popped on almost seemingly everything. But his irons have been lackluster. He is the best on Paspalum. He is very good on long courses, but there's enough here that, greens, not good. Par 3s and the par 5s, and shoot, even the par 4s, not all that good. He just hasn't been scoring well. You see him, and there's a lot of red here. He missed the cut at the Valspar, missed the cut at the Players. Now, the Genesis, he played really well, but he still lost strokes with his irons. 2 missed cuts before that, so I'm hesitant on Emiliano Grillo, but he does play well in the wind, and like I said, he popped on generally every filter that we applied. So if you're a believer in Emiliano Grillo, fire him up, but I'm just not there. Elsewhere in the 8Ks, I like Patrick Rogers, Brian Stewart, Graham McDowell. Graham McDowell's a former champion at this event at 8,900. I like Graham McDowell. He's sitting at just under 9%. I like Graham McDowell. I like both of those guys up at the top end. All three, really, to be honest. Graham McDowell, Brian Stewart, Patrick Rogers. I like all three of those guys at the upper end of the 8Ks. Moving to the high 7s, you've got your 4th most and 5th most projected owned player with Nick Taylor and Austin Smotherman. I'm not going to get away from Austin Smotherman. Love him this week. Number 1 in the irons, number 2 at the length of the par 4s, top 10 in both performance on long courses and in greens. There's a lot to like with Austin Smotherman. He's got pretty good form coming into this. Now, he's not the greatest in the wind, I'll give you that, but the irons are really, really good right now. He's coming in, Puerto Rico, he made the cut, wasn't the greatest, probably a clunker, but about top 25 of the Valspar. He had made 2 previous cuts before the miscut at the Honda. There's a lot to like with Austin Smotherman. I'm not going to be able to get away from him, even if he is pretty chalky for the area. And then Hudson Swafford's getting a lot of love at 15%. Swafford's a fade for me. Yes, I understand he won this event technically 2 years ago, but his irons have been, it says 11th. His irons have not been good since his win at Phoenix. His win at the Amex. He missed the cut at the Farmers. The Phoenix was good. He gained 4, but he lost a bajillion on the greens. And then the irons kind of have went away. You lose 7 at the Honda, lost 2 at the Players. I'm just not there with Hudson. If he plays well, I'm choosing to lose to him. That's the way it goes, especially since I like so many people in this range. Austin Smotherman being one. I don't mind Martin Keimer. I'm going to have some Haotong Li, thinking that the Sony is an indicator, not just small sample size. So yeah, there's plenty in here that I like. I can avoid Hudson Swafford chalk. David Lipsky, somebody I really like this week. Lipsky's sitting at 10%. So you're giving me 5.5% less ownership, or 5% less ownership from Swafford to Lipsky, and I think Lipsky has just as good a chance as Hudson Swafford does to finish top 15, top 10. Moving into the low fours, you have 2 guys that are really getting used. No, 1 guy really getting used, and that's Chase Seifert. Everybody else is a pivot. So I'll highlight a couple of names for you all. Max McGreevy, a little bit of a long shot, but very good on long courses, very good on Paspalum when he's played them, and good in the wind. Max McGreevy was solo second at Puerto Rico, and he didn't give the tournament to Ryan Bream. Ryan Bream just ran away from everybody, but Max McGreevy played really darn well that week. He likes the style of golf that's required here. Now the irons are really scary, but when you're coming this low in a price board at an alternate field event, you got to accept a lot of flaws in these players. Dylan Wu is somebody else I like in this area. Vaughn Taylor I've had some success with, especially if it's a putting predicated tournament. So yeah, those are a couple of names I'll highlight for you. And then moving to the 6Ks, when you talk about an alternate field event and in the 6Ks, these are players that are really, really, they're either unknown or like most of my wagers are. But the 2 or 3 names I want to highlight for you all, Justin Lauer, he popped on seemingly most of the metrics. I like him sitting at 6,900. He is at a projected ownership of 3%. I like Justin Lauer. Somebody else was, I thought he was up here, Patrick Flavin, 6,600. Really like Flavin. He popped on several of the metrics. Look here, number 1 on par 4 and of the length of the par 4s. Number 5 in windy conditions. Number 9 in long courses. There's a lot to like with Patrick Flavin. He is sitting at a projected 6%. I'm not too comfortable going much lower than Flavin. I've had success with David Lingmerth. I had some success with him at Puerto Rico, so I am okay going to David Lingmerth. I am not comfortable doing it. I'm not really comfortable doing Flavin, going as low as Flavin or Flavin, but at some point you got to get down here if you want to try to fit in your Johnny Vegases, your Matthias Schwabs, McDowell's, and whatnot. So those are a few names that I'll highlight for you in the lower part of the price board, especially the 6Ks. Let's move over to Microsoft Excel. First thing I want to do is bring up the past performance. Bring chat up. Again, sorry for all the clicking, and it's just I got a million tabs open. So this is something I do for every big tournament. Just didn't do it this week with the match play for obvious reasons. I put the records in. But this is the number of events the player has played in the past 5 years or since the tournament has been at that course, their average finish, their missed cuts, and then instead of giving a strokes gained total like Fantasy National does, went ahead and broke out all of their statistics for the years in question. So some of the players that going to highlight again: Joel Damon, 3 for 3, average finish inside the top 10. Bryce Garnett, 3 for 3, average finish inside the top 20. David Hearn, 3 for 3. George McNeil, 2 for 3, average finish of 31st. Graham McDowell, former champion. There's Lingmerth I mentioned, 2 for 3. If we come back up here, if we go to the twos, like Johnny Vegas, 2 for 2. You've got Thomas Detry, 2 for 2. Peter Uihlein, 2 for 2. Let's do a couple of sorts here. See if there's... Actually, we don't even need to sort it. Let's just see what the players are doing well. We'll start at the par 5s. Let's scroll over for you all. We'll start at the par 5s. Is there anything major here? Maybe the 600 to 650 par 5s, at least with Kramer Hickok, Grayson Sigg, and Ben Martin. But it looks like overall par 5s might be the most important. Chesson Hadley has not played the par 5s well, but the one time he played here was a tied for 13th. So, okay. Moving to the par 4s, you can see how strong the par 4 performance is. Ben Martin, 7.9, Joel Damon, 5.23. And it looks like the 400-450 is probably the most important range like we thought. All right. Par 3s. Again, I didn't see too much of a differentiation between these two in terms of importance. It was just total par 3s. So there's Chesson Hadley. That's where he makes his hay. That was on par 3s. There's Seth Reeves. Johnny Vegas is all par 5s. I don't think you can see that. No. 3.7 over here in the par 5s. All right. Birdies and bogeys, again, like I saw in Fantasy National, or we saw in Fantasy National, it looks to be about even, give or take. Some players are better than one or the other. And then greens, very, very important. And look at these high numbers here, like 8.5, 11.9, 6.7, 6.9. So I think greens are going to be the most important factor on that tab from Fantasy National. So there's a look at past performance here at Corrales. Let's move over to my rankings here, and we're going to cover the tiers lineups just very, very quickly for those who play tiers. I'm not terribly familiar with it, so I'm going to go on the assumption that the ownership is roughly the same as classic lineups. So in tier 1, you have Johnny Vegas, Joel Damon, and Sahith Theegala. I'm going to go Johnny Vegas. I think he's just the safest bet. Joel Damon is the defending champ, but I'm going to go Johnny Vegas. Tier 2, you have Mark Hubbard, Adams Vinson, Kramer Hickok, Nate Lashley, and Bryce Garnett. I imagine Bryce Garnett's the chalky option. I'm going to go with Mark Hubbard, although I don't think Adams Vinson's a terrible choice either. I'm going to avoid Kramer Hickok. I think he's going to be fairly chalky, so I will go one of the two. I would choose Hubbard, but I don't blame you if you choose Vinson. Tier 3, Matthias Schwab, Doc Redman, Brian Stewart, Graham McDowell, Thomas Detry. I think that's it. So this one's pretty loaded for me. I'm going to go with Matthias Schwab, although all 5 of these really have a justification. Doc Redman, good. Brian Stewart, McDowell, former champ. Detry popped on seemingly a lot of these filters, so I like all of them. I'm going to go Matthias Schwab. Tier 4, you have Patrick Rogers, Aaron Rye, Peter Uihlein, Grayson Sigg, Alex Smalley, Rasmus Højgaard, and Emiliano Grillo. I'd imagine Grillo's pretty chalky, and he's probably a safe bet. He just doesn't rate out well in my data model. For me, I'm probably going Patrick Rogers or Aaron Rye. I'm probably going Patrick Rogers just for the known commodity of a PGA Tour veteran. He's played well at these style of events in the past. Tier 5, absolutely loaded. Austin Smotherman, Hao Tong Lee, Nick Taylor, David Lipsky, Martin Keimer, and Danny Willett and Nikolai Højgaard. I'm going Austin Smotherman, number 1 in my data model. I'm going Austin Smotherman, although I don't fault you for taking any of these other three, except for maybe Hao Tong Lee, since it's such a small sample. But really, any of these four, I would be okay with. Finally, tier 6, Brandon Wu, Tyler Duncan, Chad Ramey, Kurt Kitayama, Hudson Swafford, Rafa Cabrera-Bello, and Nick Hardy. Well, no on Nick Hardy. A lot of people might go with Rafa for the name value. Hudson Swafford will be very, very chalky. I'm going to go with Chad Ramey. He had a very good performance at Puerto Rico. He kind of, I'll say, backed his way in. He had a very good Sunday to finish in the top 15 there. I like Chad Ramey. I like what he did on the Korn Ferry Tour. I don't think it's translated to the PGA Tour just yet, but the guy can play. So I'm going to go Chad Ramey. So there's a look at the tiers lineups. Let's do some classic lineups very, very quickly. And we scroll over one so we can look at ownerships and prices. I'm going to sort this by price, make it a little easier on myself. So salary, largest to smallest. Okay, so let's build a couple of lineups that might seemingly be chalky and see if we can build around it. So, number 1 projected owned player, Johnny Vegas. We're going to probably just start with Johnny Vegas. I imagine, actually he's second to Joel Damon, but let's start Johnny Vegas. A lot of people know him, probably going to play him. They might play Vegas and Damon, but let's start with Vegas and then move down. It looks like Adams Vincent or Kramer Hickok's getting a lot of love, so we'll go with Kramer Hickok. And then at the bottom, I always like trying to find the boundaries. Really, people aren't venturing down here all that much. They're really kind of bottoming out at Chase Seifert. Yeah, so Chase Seifert, and then probably Hudson Swafford at 76. So they are not giving themselves a lot of room to maneuver. I'll put in Tyler Duncan. He was down that far as well. You've got Hudson Swafford. And that leaves them, again, another 7,600, which could be Rafa, although he's seemingly not getting a lot of play. Maybe they're coming down off of Hickok to, I don't know, maybe Alex Smalley. Maybe that gives them a little bit more room. It leaves them 79, Nick Taylor. You can see here the players that have some name value are the ones that are getting played. And you see 14.5 projected ownership. That's pretty darn high. Even though it's the name value of those players, it's still pretty darn chalky. I'll show you a couple of lineups that I've been kind of gravitating towards, and yes, I am still going to use Johnny Vegas, even though he is so chalky and so expensive. But I've been coming down to Schwab, and even though that is higher than the Alex Smalley that your fellow contestants are going down, I gave you a couple of names in the 6Ks that I really don't mind. Flavin at 66. I'll be even more conservative. I'm going to use Justin Lauer at 6,900. So I'll define my boundary as that. So I still only have 7,500 per to play around with. I mentioned in the low sevens, there's a couple of players that I like. But if I'm doing a Johnny Vegas, Matthias Schwab, I'm going to have to be okay with doing a couple of sixes or a high 6 and a low 7. So I mentioned Max McGreevy. He's kind of a bit of a long shot there. Ben Coles, somebody else I really like. I kind of overlooked. Let's see. Seifert is pretty darn chalky. Let's do McGreevy. Again, he's a bit of a long shot, but he played well at Puerto Rico, a similar style course, similar style event. That leaves me 7,800 per. I mentioned I like Chad Ramey. I'm going to use Hao Tong Lee in this lineup. And that leaves me 8,000, which conveniently is Aaron Rai. He's a bit chalky for my liking, but it's still less than the 14.5% that we were matching using the quote name value players. And if I want to come down off of Schwab, I can. Thomas Detry, even though he's a little bit chalky. I like Graham McDowell. One here, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. You know, if I come off McDowell, now I can go up to 8,900, which is McDowell. I can come off Houghton Lee if you don't want to, you know, put a lot of stock into the small sample size. Like, you can go Graham McDowell, Patrick Rogers, get your name value there. Now you're at 7,900. That's David Lipsky, who I really like. And you're at even less projected ownership, only at 9.5. So there are a few ways to build your lineups this week. You cannot be afraid to go away from name value. Stick with a narrative and follow it through. Whether it's putting, if you're going putting, think of Vaughn Taylor. If you want to go with a lot of Korn Ferry Tour guys like McGreevy, Chad Ramey has always played well. Then you have your Schwab and Svensons up here at the top, Tagala. So feel free to reach out on social media or you know, reach out in the email or in the comments of the video for YouTube. I'll be more than happy to try to answer your last minute questions for the Corrales Punta Cana. But thanks for tuning in. I appreciate the support. I appreciate you spending your time and watching. For all of the wagers that you've made at the Corrales this week, for all of the DFS contests you've entered for the Corrales, for all of your match play bets and contests, for all of your March Madness brackets, for this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.